Yes, you guys, welcome back. Today, I'm joined by two special guests, and son of Chelsea and Joe Tweedie. And basically, we're going to discuss our UCL hopes with Tuchel as our new manager after that incredible performance against Atletico Madrid. I mean, I'm sorry, but I feel like we can go all the way. I'm not scared by no teams whatsoever. And for the next 20 minutes, we're going to discuss how we can progress in this year's UCL under Thomas Tuchel. So let me quickly introduce the guest today, son of Chelsea. How you doing, man?
Really good after last night. Amazing result, and great to be here with you and Joe to speak about Chelsea and where we can go in Europe, because it could be an extraordinary end to a pretty ridiculous season.
Perfect, man. And Joe, how you doing today?
Yeah, same. Really good after last night. Was one of those performances that you just wake up smiling about and have been thinking about all day. So yeah, happy to get into it with you and Daniel. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, and you guys, of course, in the description and in the scrolling text too, there are going to be links, all the great things that both these guys are doing. Of course, check out Son of Chelsea's podcast. You'll find the info in the description. And check out Joe Tweedie's newsletter as well, which you'll also find in the description below. So, let's get straight into things right now. And, wow, the performance yesterday under Tuchel. When's the last time we've been able to dominate a team in Europe like this? Being the team that was controlling the game from the start, setting the precedent, taking the game to our opponents. And, to play this style against Atletico Madrid, it's no easy feat. I mean, these guys have been making their names in Europe over the past 10 years, been very unlucky not to actually win this UCL tournament themselves. And I don't think I've seen a team really just destroy them in a sense. I know destroy is a bit of a strong word, but it really felt like destruction I was witnessing yesterday, like what I saw in that game. So, son of Chelsea, just how impressive was that win for you last night?
Yeah, it was quite incredible. I was quite surprised at the ease of which Chelsea beat Atletico Madrid. I was very cautious before the game, having seen Atletico win some big away ties in Europe. This was obviously not the same group of players, but I remember them beating Pep Guardiola's Bayern back in 2016. That was an amazing result. Bayern that night were incredible. And you even have to look back 12 months, I think, to the day they beat Liverpool at Anfield. And that Liverpool team is really good compared to the current one. They were really at their strongest. So you have to be cautious, and especially Chelsea's hoodoo in the last 16 over the last 7 years. You don't want to go too strong. And I felt this after we beat Liverpool at Anfield, that it was like the best performance I've seen in some time. I think I can quite confidently say that last night's the best performance I've seen, arguably since Baku in 2019 against Arsenal, if you want to put it more in a European context. I think if you just want to put it in a Champions League context, you have to go back to 2014, probably against PSG, which was, a very difficult game on the night. But I think what I loved about it was like a blend of old Chelsea and, for me, what a new vision of Chelsea could be. I think the rigidness and the intensity to which we defended, the structure of the defence has been wonderful in recent weeks. What Tuchel has been able to implement, really strengthening that defence, but also the fluidity of that front three, almost having it's a big term or a lazy term at times, a false nine in Kai Havertz, but that fluidity of that front three that we felt could be utilised with three players in the summer, Werner, Havertz and Ziyech, who are quite versatile and you felt could play in different positions. So to see all of that come together on a big night for Chelsea was wonderful. And I think that just the way that there was, watching Chelsea over the years, especially in the Champions League, you felt there's going to be a stressful moment here. This is not just going to go throughout the whole night. Watching football, Chelsea probably going to be the death of me watching them. So I expected something to go wrong, and it never did. And I think that there's been a lot of talk about the big opposition we've beaten in the recent weeks under Tuchel, whether that be Spurs, whether that be Liverpool, Atletico twice, and talking about how poor the opposition were. I think once you can sort of maybe say that twice, I guess, and in the context of all these three teams we've beaten recently, I know you can make the argument that they're not in the best form when we face them. But I think it's about Chelsea's own game taking the threat away from those opponents, really nullifying their biggest threats. And I'm sure Joe will come to this. I'm sure you'll come to this as well. I think there are certain players within that squad, the less obvious ones I've had doubts about, who had some of their best performance for Chelsea. So it was wonderful all round, really.
Yeah, and there was one thing that you touched upon as you were speaking, and that was obviously seeing a style for the future. Like, Joe, did you feel like last night you saw a style you could get behind, and a style that you can see evolving and progressing as the future goes on?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been quite reserved in terms of trying to predict the future. I would say with Tuchel, someone who watched, I think, an awful lot of his Dortmund side, who watched a fair amount of his PSG side, who's kind of researched him to death really in terms of his quotes and how he sees football. There's a great quote when he was at Mainz where he talks, he wants to play with lots of flair and lots of attacking pace, and he really wants to kind of be a really front foot team. And then you sort of look at Chelsea at the moment, and you just think, okay, Tuchel has come in, been incredibly intelligent with how he set the team up, playing this sort of very, I wouldn't say cautious style, but just a very, very controlled game in terms of how we approach things. And that style, I think for me, that's what I've not necessarily been completely behind, but from what I would say from last night was certainly that when you start adding wrinkles like the ability to counter teams like we did for both of those goals, little bits of spice here and there in terms of the play style, that's when you can start seeing some of the evolution, I think, in this team. I don't think necessarily at the moment the way that we play in the Premier League, because teams will just put 10 men behind the ball, and then it's just a question of us trying to find that little moment of magic. But in Europe, I think this style of play actually is something that is going to be very conducive to us playing particularly well. And I think for, just for completeness sake here, Atletico Madrid are an absolutely incredible football team. And I think, when Daniel was talking, I can't think of a Chelsea performance in Europe where we played someone as good as Atletico. They are top of La Liga by 4 points. They are probably the best team in Spain at the moment, where we've actually just completely and utterly made them look quite average. And this isn't just a really a one-off game over both legs, really. I mean, the first leg, we controlled the game completely. We had so much territory, so much ball. But last night felt like a little bit of a step up from even that first leg. And you add in these little nuances, these little wrinkles, some of the interchanges, the way that we're actually taking advantage of when we were turning the ball over. Both of those counters for the goals were fantastic to watch. I know we've seen the side by side with the Barcelona goal with with Lampard, Ramirez, and Drogba. Obviously, very, very eerie similarities there. But I think last night is the first time I've really looked at this side and thought, what Tuchel is. He's building this in phases in terms of how he wants to construct the side. He's got the platform now where, I could be stupid and say, we're never going to concede a goal again and all this sort of like stupid stuff. In my head, I want to say, but I probably won't commit to it. But the defensive platform he's established now, if you can start adding some of these counter-attacking or a little bit more fluidity going forward, we're not a team that I think people will want to play against. And the only big challenge for us, and this isn't Tuchel kind of sort of in isolation. This is a Lampard thing, a Sarri thing. You could say a Kante thing, second season. We need to figure out how to beat teams consistently who play low blocks. That has been a problem for Chelsea for 2, 3, maybe even 4 seasons. And to be honest, and given the way that Tuchel has coached the side, I actually have a lot of confidence in him to come up with those sorts of solutions. But that is the only thing really now when I look at this team, and that's more of a Premier League thing where I think of, the evolution, the future of this side is going to be how do we, unpick a lock when we've got two banks of 4 or even, a bank of 5, bank of 4, whatever it is, and teams are very content to just sit there and let us play in front of them. So that is the only question. But that question has been one that I've asked probably for a number of seasons now. But I think with Tuchel, certainly probably next season looking at potential signings we might get and how he wants to shape the team, I do have confidence that he can actually be the guy to come up with these sort of solutions. So, but yeah, just to sort of round things off from last night in particular, the thing that impressed me most, as I say, was the fact that we were willing to actually start playing a little bit quicker, and actually the counter-attacking style is absolutely perfect for Europe. Probably maybe only Porto and actually it's probably only Porto would be the only team that I think we'd go in and say that we are confidently like the top dog in that performance. If we have this underdog mentality, we're happy to play on the counter. I think teams will come unstuck when they play against us. City and PSG and Bayern, probably teams that have a lot of quality. But this setup that we have, the way that we are playing, if we are going to be able to counter teams like we did against Atletico, and bear in mind, again, Atletico are fantastic defensively, they're a really top team. That gives me a lot of confidence going forward. But as I say, the only tweak in the Premier League I want to see is this ability to consistently consistently create high quality chances against teams who are quite happy to sit defensively. But I think that will come over time. But in Europe, I think this style of play that we saw last night, if that continues to develop, I think we're going to be massive problems for everyone.
Yeah, I think, really well said as always. You know, that game last night made me realise, you know, why can't the Premier League be this fun? You know, you're constantly playing against teams that only care about, you know, keeping their shape, being defensive, parking the bus. And you think, I'm being cynical, but you think with all the money that's invested here, that the quality of football would be reflected. Hopefully in the future, that's something we might see. But, you know, to get back to the game, you guys, you know, get me so gassed again. Just reimagining the game from hearing you guys just describe your thoughts and opinions on it. And yeah, you know, for me, I really feel like I don't have any fear when it comes to playing against other big teams. Yeah, people talk about Bayern Munich and Man City, but I think with how we play, the tactical nature, the structure too as well, you know, how Tuchel, you know, his philosophy on exploiting the team's weakness and of course, you know, nullifying their main strengths as well. I think that's what really typifies him. And I think against Atleti, that was on show. But son of Chelsea, I want to ask you, who was one player that really stood out for you in last night's game and really gave you that confidence?
I mean, it's quite hard not to talk about number 7. I mean, because I feel Kante was just phenomenal. I mean, it really was. I don't think I have enough words to describe that performance. And it was just wonderful to see him back to the levels we know he can have for Chelsea. I think Kante, it's more interesting to me under Tuchel seeing players that I have bigger doubts about succeed rather than Kante, because I know Kante is one of the best midfielders in the world. When he's like that, like he was last night, he's the best midfielder in the world in my opinion, and I don't think that's hyperbole. I think he was absolutely ridiculous last night. I mean, he takes Chelsea to another level. I think to see Mateo Kovacic have a performance like that in a big game for Chelsea, I think is really impressive to me. I think psychologically, the way Antonio Rudiger, I felt, has dealt with this situation and all the scrutiny and criticism and has come back and really impressed me in that back three. I think players like that, I think, have impressed me recently, like Rudiger, and of course he wasn't there last night, but Christensen too. I think that's the impressive thing. And the impressive thing, it seems that despite what Tuchel does in terms of personnel rotation, and you can't be that surprised because this is the history of Thomas Tuchel as a coach. He's done this frequently. We knew he was going to frequently change his team in and out, and the way he's done that. But I think, you know, we could spend most of the video speaking about Kante, and I think just rather than just looking at what he did in this performance, because we know what Kante is best at, I thought passing wise he was wonderful. I mean, there's been, I think, a lot of nonsense about Kante's passing ability, and last night you saw it in full flow and what it can do to Chelsea. Just the simplicity of passing, like just getting the ball forward and being able to break the Atletico press. I think both him and Kovacic work so well in that aspect in the middle of the park to dominate both Koke and Nageza. I mean, they completely destroyed that midfield, both of them. And I think both of those players, because the midfield is always so key in the modern game now, and especially those two players. But Rudiger, I just loved Rudiger. I think what he done last night, and him and Zuma in particular, one moment that I just adored. And I think psychologically, I'm sorry to ramble. I think that there were so many good performances, and I think that it's easy to talk about Kante, but I think that it'd be wrong of me not to pick out players who I think I've been critical of in the past and doubted in the past whether they could rise to this level for Chelsea on one night, and I think they did.
Yeah, man. Again, well said. I get kind of surprised myself when, you know, Kante's technical game is like questioned. You know, common things like his weight of pass. What does that even mean anymore? I don't know. But for me, you know, Kante, his positioning is what really stands out. He's always in the right areas at the right time, knows where to be defensively, knows where to be to support the attack as well. And yeah, again, another big game where Kante steps up, stands out, and leads the team as well. So as we were saying, we could easily discuss Kante throughout the entire video. But Joe, I want to ask you some more questions about the front three we saw yesterday. Obviously, Timo Werner seems to be playing more of a striker role this time, probably the first time you've seen him play this role under Thomas Tuchel. Did you like how Tuchel used Havertz and Ziyech to be able to create those spaces for Werner to run in behind?
Yeah, I think what we saw first half really was again, kind of the first sort of nod to giving the attack a little bit more freedom of expression in terms of moving from their areas that they're playing in. You know, if you look at Werner for the goal, for example, obviously he's playing as centre forward, but he appears in a wide left channel. And I think giving players the ability to rotate freely into different areas of the pitch, I think that's when you start causing teams problems. Particularly, you know, if you look at how Atletico Madrid typically defend, you know, the back four very kind of solid in terms of how they defend. In some cases, very narrow, and that midfield is very competitive with both Sauer and Koke, obviously both capable of screening a back four and putting some challenges in. But I think the major thing that I found of interest is actually probably I don't want to call it a resurgence, because I think Kai Havertz is an absolutely wonderfully gifted sort of player, but this sort of post-Corona, I'll call it the post-Corona Kai, you know, we are starting to see the reason that Chelsea were quite willing to pay that sort of money from him. And I'm not saying by any stretch of imagination that this was like an Eden Hazard at his peak destruction-esque performance. But last night, some of the touches that he made, the ability to win 3 kicks, some of the positions he was taking, some of his passing, I think just his general gameplay. And then once you see him get the ball and turn and beat people and then open up, he is incredibly quick at carrying the ball. I think he's got this sort of Balak-esque gait where it looks like he's just sort of floating around the pitch. But when he gets going, I mean, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Koke who he turned him and then he tried to grab him. But by the time his hand had moved, like Havertz was already 5 yards ahead of him. I think his performance, is one to really take note of, because he's starting to really influence the game in terms of the ability for Chelsea to progress play out the pitch. One of my big concerns from the season has been with kind of at least sort of the 2 forwards that we've played, is the ability not to play into their feet, and then obviously we lose the ball straight away and then we're kind of on the back foot. With Havertz, you can play him the ball, and now you're seeing the strength and you're seeing the sort of the physique that he has, the ability to hold the ball and then bring other midfielders, bring other players into the game. I think Ziyech as well, for me, I was incredibly happy that he got the goal. I saw, certainly on socials, there must have been about 400 people tweeting, get him off, get him off, get him off, get him off. And honestly, someone that I followed for a very long time did a get him off tweet, and probably about 5 seconds later he scored, which is probably the favourite one that I've seen. But it was a nice moment for him to actually get the goal, and it's such an important goal as well. So I'm hopeful that he can actually take that and sort of progress that forward in terms of performances. Now, I felt he was better. I still think, you know, pretty much like he said, he still doesn't think that he's at the level that he can be, but he's creeping back towards that sort of level there. And I think for some of these players as well, these kind of inside number 10s or this sort of inside forward role, it's a little bit new to a lot of them. You know, it's a bit different to what they're used to, different positional requirements, different ways of playing, different rotations, all the sort of things you want to look at. But I think they both did particularly well. And then again, you know, Werner, for all of his insane touches and craziness, his pace and his willingness to just continue running and just the amount of effort that he puts in. And then, you know, for me, you know, personally, like the ball for the goal, it's such a quality cross as well. You know, he's actually shown the quality at the end of one of these runs as well. So I think, really impressed with the front three. I think the really probably the 2 takeaways would be, I think Kai Havertz is going to start being a really important player for us towards the end of the season. But also the fact that there was so much rotation, so much movement, there was so much real confusion for Atletico on who to pick up and where players were. If this is going to be, again, another wrinkle that Tuchel was adding to the system, it kind of only bodes well for the future, because you start looking at other players that can potentially rotate in there, different guys towards the end of the season, giving them that freedom to switch flanks, to play as the number 9, to play wide left, to play wide right, whatever it's going to be. Then again, you know, we become even more of a problem for teams to deal with. So it was those 2 things for me. The Havertz's performance, I think, the sort of indicative, I think, of where he's going to be sort of in the future, but also that front three, just the fluidity. And again, you know, looking at Atletico Madrid, they are one of the best defensive teams in Europe. And I keep saying this just to, you know, remind people that Atletico Madrid are a really good team. And I know last night didn't really show that, but the fact that their defence, you know, 2 guys got booked. Obviously, one of the guys got sent off. Trippier got subbed. Literally the entire back four either got booked, subbed, or red carded. To put it into context of how little they could deal with what we were doing. So, you know, it's going to be a problem for teams to really sort of figure out how to deal with this in the future. So yeah, I'm super happy with the direction. I'm just hopeful that, again, these are signs that we're going to see that sort of Tuchel kind of build on in phase and start introducing some of this stuff going forward.
Yeah, for real, man. For me, with the attack as well on top, I felt like the front three could play their natural game a bit more. You know, Werner making runs behind, really utilising his pace. You know, just terrorising that Atleti defence, stretching them whenever he wanted to. You know, Ziyech constantly able to, you know, receive down that right-hand side channel, linking up with Reece James. No surprise that these two linking up again brings creativity. I saw that they both made 3 key passes in that game versus Atleti, and you know, how often have we been able to consistently see them play together? And on top of that, you know, Kai, Z constantly rotating and interchanging positions too. You know, it's the most fluid I've seen us play. And it does feel like this is maybe something that Tuchel has been working towards. First time seeing the new guys playing up front together. Of course, there are questions posed in regards to what this means for maybe your Mounts, Hudson-Odois, but I feel like that can be discussed in the future. But I don't know, me personally, what the game really proves to me is that we really have a squad that is suited to cope against many different teams. In the second half, when Atleti, of course, had to push up a bit more, leave more space in behind, Tuchel knew that was going to be the case. In comes Hudson-Odoi, in comes Pulisic, and then no surprise on the counter-attack, you know, eventually after many failed attempts, we were able to get a goal from an unlikely source in Emerson. And, you know, this is what Tuchel does. His willingness to use the squads, to give them opportunities, no surprise has energized them. You know, guys like Emerson out of the team for most times. I think I read a stat somewhere on Twitter suggesting that he hadn't even started in like, what, 400 days in the Premier League, which is absolutely crazy. But, you know, he gets his little moment himself, coming on, making it 2-0 to, you know, make that what was a dominant win, you know, even more sexier at the end. But, yeah, Tuchel, rotation, utilising the squads. We're seeing players able to play their game even better now. I think this is why Kante is really going to benefit, because I feel like he has been kind of mistreated is the strong words, but it kind of feels like that in a sense, where, you know, this whole notion that, you know, he's a physical machine, he can just ride whatever wave comes his way, you know, he can play through injuries, whatever. I mean, he can't, he's a human being, and no surprise that at times his form dipped ever so slightly. But I think now that Tuchel is rotating the midfield now, you know, Jorginho, Cover, Kante, they can reserve their energies, they can play, you know, their best games more consistently. No surprise why Kante stepped up even more now that he's found himself back in the team and had masterclasses against many of the big teams in which, you know, Tuchel was expecting to use him in. So yeah, I feel like with our discussion, it's really painting a picture for the future in regards to how we can break teams down, you know, the strength and depth we have, you know, how we play, how we manage games on top of that. And I guess I'd have to ask you guys this now. In the quarterfinals, starting with you, son of Chelsea, what team are you hoping that we get?
I think you have to say Porto, because I think that's the team everyone wants. They did incredible in the last round against Juventus, but I'd probably say just behind that, because I think it's very unlikely we're going to get Porto, because I don't expect to get an easy draw. I'd probably say Borussia Dortmund, just simply because I think their defence is quite shaky. And as we've been speaking about the counter-attacking style we utilised last night to perfection against Atletico Madrid, I think that could be something we could use against Borussia Dortmund. I think with Haaland, who is basically instrumental to their attack, you know, he's the reason they got through that second leg. They were really shaky, and I think that Tuchel would love to go up against his old club and get one over on them. So I think Porto is the one you'd be very happy with, and I think would make us all believe that potentially something special could happen. But I think I don't know if we've even faced Borussia before. At least in the modern, you know, at least in the time Robben's been in charge, I don't think we faced Borussia in the Champions League. So it'd be an interesting game. And I think those are the two teams I'd sort of look at and go, I think this team can do something against them.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, man. Dortmund, I just don't feel they're great defensively. I think that there's goals in that team. I feel like they're a team that make individual mistakes. And, you know, I just love the storyline of Tuchel going back to his former ground and, you know, just kind of exploiting them, and of course, you know, gives us an opportunity to tap up Erling Haaland even more, you know what I mean? But Joe, man, what team are you hoping that we could possibly get next round?
I have one in mind, but I don't know if I want to commit to it publicly.
Okay.
I'll say, okay, so the team that I want, I mean, I'm not going to beat it out of the bush here. I mean, it's Porto, and it's no disrespect to them. I think obviously they've done incredibly well, certainly the Juventus result, but I am all for getting the easiest path of resistance to a potential final. I'm not here to be, you know, you've got to beat the best teams, all that kind of stuff. I would quite gladly play all the worst teams and get to a final. And it's not by any stretch of imagination saying that they're a bad team, but comparatively, they're probably the lowest ranked team in terms of people left. The one that I'm reluctant to commit to is probably Liverpool. Now, I just think that they're there for the taking at the moment. Over 2 legs, I have a feeling that Tuchel would probably get the better of Klopp in terms of how we can set up against them, how we can play against them. So I think, again, if we're looking back to those early sort of 2000s battles between Benitez and Mourinho, rekindling a little bit of that rivalry. I fancy, again, this could be stupid because they may obviously turn it on in 2 weeks' time and become the Liverpool that won the title. But currently, I mean, let's just put it this way, I wouldn't be too upset if we drew Liverpool. I think Tuchel has the ability to put a game plan together that I think would win over 2 legs versus them as well. But Porto, first choice. Liverpool would be my dark horse.
Okay. I definitely understand what you're saying there. Okay. I feel like, for me, I like to play against Dortmund. I don't know, I just feel like they're the type of team that we can definitely exploit. Again, they're not defensive. I think with Porto, they'd be more willing to just park the bus, and I feel like that's one of our weaknesses at times, is really breaking down teams that park the bus, because I feel like you need to add more to your game in that sense. You need players that in the moment have the individual quality to take advantage of moments. I think a lot of times, of course the system helps, but then you're hoping that quality can add to that as well in these difficult games. With Dortmund, I can't see them out pressing us. That feels pretty impossible to me. I feel like we could limit the chances that Haaland could get to, receiving from their wide players too. And defensively, I feel like you can definitely get at them, and they can be exploited. I don't know. I feel like they'd be like the perfect quarterfinal team. And
can I just say as well on Dortmund, Timo and Kai, I mean, coming up against Bundesliga opposition, I think the type of game that suits them, especially Timo, the sort of space that he'd be able to get that he hasn't been able to get. I mean, that was one of the wonderful things about last night, was finally using Timo to his best ability, being able to play balls for him to run onto in space. And the way Borussia play, they're not going to sit back because they don't have the players to do it. They're not going to come to the bridge and sit in a low block. If they try and do it, they're probably going to fail at it. So I think that's something I'd look at and go, Timo, Kai, those players, especially Timo, with the sort of Bundesliga type of opponent that you'd want. I think it's why Liverpool really succeeded against Leipzig, because finally a team came to Anfield, or at least in over 2 legs, and gave them a lot of space to exploit. I just, it's not, Haaland is a monster, he really is, but I think that especially for Timo in particular, I think that's an opponent. Porto, yes, in terms of quality, but they're going to sit deep. If I was to specifically look at our best players and say, who would you want to face to get the best out of them, it'd probably be Liverpool and Dortmund, because Liverpool play with their high line like a Bundesliga side, and that's where Timo got a lot of joy the other week. So I agree with Joe. I think that psychologically Liverpool, without the Anfield crowd there as well for the home leg, I think would help Chelsea as well.
Okay, so
really good question, Ian. Just for both you guys about Dortmund, because it's, would you play Zuma on Haaland, or would you play Christensen?
I was just thinking that. I was literally just thinking
as you guys are saying that, I was thinking, would you just take man mark him?
I mean, for me, Zuma versus Haaland, that would be some battle. I don't think Haaland's come up against many defenders like him, and I feel like with our back 3-2, it's done a masterful job recently of just nullifying some really amazing attacking players. But I mean, I'd pay to see that Zuma versus Haaland.
The tag team of Rudy again and Zuma would be hilarious. It's just I want both of those. I want Zuma given a 5-year contract after what he did last night. So Zuma to me, I think he'd go up against anyone. And it's a bit like Diego and JT going up against each other again. When we faced Atletico in 2014, those two squaring up with each other. And then of course Diego was JT's teammate in a couple months' time. So I think it could be a similar story with Haaland. And you need the physicality, but it's what we've been discussing, right? It's the trust within the squad. It's the trust that there are a variety of players like Christensen has been incredible. I never saw this run of performances from him, especially physically. It's not the strengths of his game in terms of passing, elegance, passing the ball out for the back, being a good sweeper in a back three. It's the physical side of the game that has really impressed me. His ability to go up against a wide array of attackers and nullify them. So I think we all have to say at this point, based on the evidence we've seen, despite some doubts we have, that you've got to trust Tuchel when he puts players out there, because it's working at the moment. We're 100%. Not conceding any goals. So, until that changes, we have to back the manager. We have to back the decisions he makes, even if sometimes we think personally that player should be in there or that player should be in there. I was disappointed with some of the decisions he made last night, but especially ziyech, and I was proven wrong in the end, and that's the sign of a good coach, that he makes these big calls. I think Chelsea fans need to get it into their head that this is a guy who's a bit more like Guardiola than Klopp, despite being a German coach, despite liking a version of gegenpressing. He's a lot more about positional play. He's a lot more about possession. And he's going to, a bit like Pep, he rotates pretty frequently. He's really specific about, I think when we think about games, sorry to overrun this, but just when we think about games and opposition, I try now, when I'm thinking about the team he's going to select, I think about the opposition and what is he going to prioritize in this particular game. What do we need in this particular game? Not what I think about form of players or my preferred players. That's just the way I go about it. So it's exciting. It really is, I think, for Chelsea fans of what this guy could do with Chelsea, because he's done so well, breaking 2 records, going to Anfield and winning and getting us through to the last 8 of the Champions League since 2014, first time.
Yeah, I think that in itself, incredible records. And, if there was going to be a manager that could help us reach, get past that final line, it was going to be Thomas Tuchel. I just think, as you said very eloquently, man, the philosophy of how Tuchel works, the differences between him, Klopp, and just that sense of control, that sense of positional play, that sense of being able to, as I'm always constantly stressing, exploit a team's weakness and nullify their main strengths. I think that's what Thomas Tuchel is really about. So, you guys, so we can end this real quick, do you think we have a big opportunity now to actually win this UCL this year? I'll let anyone of you
go first.
Yeah.
Oof. I don't want to be too loud about it, but there is just this Gary Neville stars are aligning kind of commentary running through my head at times. So I do think the way we are playing, the way we're set up, the way that we're playing like a really, really strong European style of football, particularly in the Champions League. And if we can continue to build on incrementally onto what we saw, certainly against Atletico, I just don't think a lot of teams are going to want to play us. And it's a psychological thing. Chelsea don't concede. Chelsea can take their chances. Chelsea have just, completely and utterly smashed Atletico. I think if we can avoid City and Bayern in the next round, I think we've got a really sneaky chance of making it to the final. And to be honest, in a one-off game, I do fancy us against most people at the moment. I don't care if it's Bayern or City or whoever in the final. In a one-off game, Tuchel, game plan, etc. I do think he has it in him to come up with something, even if it's playing like 11 centre-backs. I'm sure with 11 centre-backs, we might actually win as well. So, whatever he plans to do, I think we've got it. But I have a little quiet confidence that I think we might be able to push and do something special this season.
Okay, Daniel, man.
I don't want to commit to saying we can win the Champions League because, I hide that 2012 team so high in regard of what that team was and who was in that team. We've seen, Chelsea won the Champions League in 2012 with the squad that you felt was most unlikely to win it. So it'd be typical Chelsea in this season to go and do something remarkable, wouldn't it? I do agree that I think that it's a cup competition at the end of the day, the unique circumstances of the Champions League, and you don't even need to play that well. I've been hearing a lot of sort of commentary recently about this. It's about getting the job done. It's about being smart, intelligent on the night, those fine margins that Chelsea are getting right at the moment under Thomas Tuchel. And I think we've got the right coach who has the blend of pragmatism and also, I think, a progressive style of play that works in the modern game as well. Because I don't think you can just, it's not going to be like 2012 where we're just sitting back for the whole game. I think we've got a coach now who I think is trying to blend the two, and I think it works with the squad. I think getting to the quarterfinals is massive, but yeah, I think it does depend on the draw because I think City and Bayern are a level above us at the moment. And I do think especially City may finally have the answers. But I think anyone else, if we can once you get to the semis, I think it's on, isn't it? It's on. And if we can get to is it Istanbul this year, isn't it? The final, considering the time of year it is and considering, fans may be back in stadiums for some games, it would be absolutely mental. So, I don't want to write anything off because it would be wonderful. It really would.
Yeah, I've always remained, forever optimistic. I look at my rivals, I look at the rest of the competition in Europe, and I don't think they're on the same level as they used to be. Bayern Munich, outstanding, but are they as good as they were last year? I'm not too sure. Real Madrid's, your Barca's, your Liverpool, so many of them aren't on the same level that they used to be on. I think right now, with the introduction of Tuchel coming halfway through the season, it's really re-energized us. It's given us something different now. You know, managers now are struggling to find tactical plans to cope against us quickly. And I think, you know, as you were saying earlier, Joe, it feels like a lot of things are just like aligning in our favour. And just by that manner of that win over Atleti last night, because we don't normally win, not normally, we never win like that. Not against the big clubs, against the big boys, but we absolutely nullified Simeone over 2 legs. You know, they looked lost, and I could see that. You know, they didn't know whether to press, when to keep their position. They were like, okay, we need to try and get back in this game. But then when we do that, we're leaving space in behind, and then, you know, we're getting outmanned in areas where they're easily able to just close us down, win the ball back, and obviously have fun running in behind us. They looked like a team that didn't know what the hell to do. And I feel like there's going to be other teams that could obviously, you know, suffer the same way that Atleti did. You know, should I be saying we can win this? I don't know if I can. I'd love to say it though, but I do feel confident that, you know, we are going to be proud by the team in this year's tournament. But there you have it, you guys. That was the discussion based on the game last night. Of course, as I stressed, in the description below, there is going to be all the relevant information, all the right plugs for these guys. Make sure you follow their podcasts and newsletters in the scrolling text too. I'm sure you guys have been seeing it for yourselves. But on that note, I'm going to wrap things up, keep things moving. I'm the EFC. This is BluelionsTV. I'll catch you guys later for some more videos.